Welcome back, and welcome for the first time to all of you who are here for the first time. Hidden Currencies rests on a simple proposition. Water is already doing the quiet governance work in our lives, whether we notice it or not. We have tried to treat water not just as infrastructure, or not just as a resource, but as infrastructure and as culture. And we have built a program around water as a confluence, featuring art, science, governance, Indigenous knowledge, all sharing the same room and nothing competing for dominance. Tonight is perhaps the least Swiss of the evenings that we've had, but it's a very important one, and so we're very glad that you're here and that we get to do this. The story we're about to watch is a Klamath story. The dams that came down in 2024 came down after decades of work led by tribal nations and work that I am still learning about. And tonight, as a consulate, we're here to host that story and to listen. That has been one of the ambitions of Hidden Currencies all along. Switzerland takes water stewardship very seriously, not because we have all the answers, but we take it seriously because we share water across borders, across generations, and across very different relationships to the same flowing systems. And the Klamath story is one of those flowing systems and one of those relationships, and a remarkable one. One of tonight's panelists, Annelia Norris, is also one of the artists in the exhibition, and her work is an important part of the conversation that we're going to have, and it's, of course, in the center of the room. We have two parts for tonight's program. We'll start with a short excerpt of the documentary on damming Klamath by Swiftwater Films, and then a conversation. And I think we have the right people in the room for the conversation. And enough from me. So back to you, Amy. Thanks for being here.
So now we're going to dive into a conversation that kind of dives into some of the aspects of the film and what these kinds of movements yield. Leading that conversation will be Mary Miller. Mary is a science communicator, digital media producer, and educator in the San Francisco Bay Area. In her writing, Mary concentrates on the confluence of water, energy, and the environment in the West, and completed a research and reporting fellowship about the deconstruction of 4 dams on the Klamath River and restoration of salmon habitat in Northern California and Oregon. Her current reporting project involves the removal of diversion and hydroelectric dams on the Eel and Russian rivers and restoration of the 2 watersheds. Mary's work has taken her to the ice fields of Antarctica and Greenland, in a NOAA hurricane hunter studying atmospheric rivers, and aboard oceanographic research vessels remotely exploring deep-sea volcanoes. Mary?
All right, so we heard from Kara earlier. She provided this fantastic context about what damage dams can do. But she's here to talk professionally about how to build restoration. Kara Briggs was a career journalist for 2 decades, telling the stories of Western United States from 2 leading regional newspapers before launching a popular column in ICT about cancer in tribal communities while she was battling cancer and survived cancer. She's worked with tribes from Arizona to Alaska in various professional roles, and now serves as Vice President of Tribal Lands and Water Stewardship at EcoTrust, a nonprofit for which she works with tribes across the West Coast. So let's welcome Kara back up. Kara, the film shows the amazing resilience of salmon and Indigenous peoples, but also the fight, about how they fight. Can you talk about the role of tribes using voices, asserting sovereign rights to advocate for dam removal and lead efforts at restoration?
Oh, absolutely. The work on the Klamath River was just truly amazing. It clearly, from what you see in the film, but what you've also seen for years now in media and politics, the tribes and their allies were able to catalyze our sort of multimedia world today and bring together people who were unthinkable. It was unthinkable. Some of the allies, some of the landowners that came together, came to have a construction worker removing the dam saying, this is the vestiges of colonialism. That is just tremendous public education work that has occurred. I think of these recent dam removals, of the modern removals, beginning in 2011 to 2014 with the Elwha River Dam, led by the Elwha tribe on the Olympic Peninsula of Washington State, and that was led really, what catalyzed that, what is catalyzing these major river dam removals are the tribes. It's just not happening, it's not happening without the tribes. But that first one in Elwha, gosh, getting 15 or more years now, where Elwha, the tribe, is continuing the science. Some of the challenge of dam removal is the river you get back when the dam comes down is not the river that was there when the dam was put in. And the Elwha tribe in particular talks about now getting toward 20 years of science of recovery of that river system. And recovery of the, the tiny creatures who live in the rivers that feed the salmon, that feed the other species, that are coming back. They're coming back slowly over time. There's certainly some exciting moments because salmon will come back. There was a salmon scientist at Yakama Nation said the salmon, or think of your dog in the yard, they're going to run around the fence till they find the hole in it. Salmon are that kind of devotion and integrity to returning upstream. There are efforts across the West to remove dams. The next dams that we hope are removed are on the Snake River. Many of these dams, the complication of these large dams, stop me when you want, are where they intersect with energy. It's the Federal Energy
Regulatory
Commission.
Yes, that makes the decision, yes.
That makes the decision for energy producing dams. Other dams across the region across the West have been coming down of these last 15 years. Privately owned dams, small dams, irrigation dams, dams that no longer served a purpose. Many of the large projects you hear about will involve a tribe, but there are firms that all they do is dam removal, at least up to this current administration.
Yeah, I want to acknowledge this beautiful painting here, which shows the connection. I mean, it's an abalone shell with water flowing into a river with salmon. But to me, this really shows that interconnectedness of the ocean and rivers and how really these salmon are bringing resources from the ocean up into these forest systems and tribal systems that is just really a beautiful expression of that and about these sacred living things. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of salmon to West Coast tribes? They're often this symbol, but it's not just salmon. It's really a kind of broader perspective that you're taking and working. And you can mention about eco-trust and how you really are building these coalitions to help not just salmon, but I think we saw bald eagles, we saw a bear. There is so much more to it than just, will the salmon come back?
Well, salmon are a keystone species of the ecosystem. Salmon, the decline, the loss of salmon is what is causing the orcas in the near where I live, near Seattle. Causing the decline of the orcas. The salmon have impacts all the way upstream, all the way downstream. Historically, we know, I've been told by a Yakama elder, our forests, we can't even imagine how lush our forests were when all of the the mass runs of salmon were coming back upstream and being carried off by bears and variously fertilizing the forests. From my family, my Yakima family talks about, I mean, people who are probably 80 years old, would be maybe 90 years old now, grew up eating salmon for every meal of the day, and we really believe that that was part of our resilience and our good health. And so the decline of the salmon, the purposeful, people can say it was otherwise, but we also have records. The purposeful decimation of the salmon was directly tied to genocidal impulses against the tribes in the 20th century. And our health disparities now show that.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Cara. I want to expand the conversation and bring Felicia Marcus on stage. Felicia is an attorney and consultant with 35 years of expertise in organizational management, policy development, program implementation, and public engagement at the federal, state, and local level. She is currently the William C. Landreth Visiting Fellow at Stanford University's Water in the West program. Not a professor, but a very important person in helping educate the next generation of policymakers. She was also chair of the California State Water Board with regulatory responsibility for water conservation, groundwater management, wastewater recycling, stormwater capture and desalination, water rights laws, and the state's drinking water program. Wow, that is a lot. So, Felicia, I don't need to tell you that water in California is one of the most complicated and contentious issues in the state, and it's been that way for a long time. Without getting too far in the weeds, can you talk about how to resolve water wars where one side wants to, say, tear down a dam, the other wants to keep their reservoir? I know there's senior and junior water rights, and tribes are really important voices. How do you decide who's at the table? How do you sort out so many competing claims? Feel free to use Klamath as an example.
Yeah, it's first of all, it's really an honor to be here with this panel and at this moment. I have spent a lot of my career working with tribes and have had moments, particularly when I was at EPA at the federal level, but also at a big nonprofit, Trust for Public Land, getting land back to tribes, and also at the Water Board. And there have been moments and times when I've been honored to be deemed a cultural ally, which is something only the tribes can do. And the Klamath, my disclaimer is we did have a role in it. I can talk about that a little bit, but I'm a bit player compared to the amazing people you saw in that film, or Brian Johnson, who's sitting in the back row, both from Trout Unlimited, a lawyer, and then later on the Klamath River Renewal Corporation that brought the dams down. There are just so many heroes in this. And it's, in short answer to your question, it takes people willing to go beyond themselves or their group and see the needs of multiple players, not necessarily every player, but multiple players, to try and help the decision maker be able to arrive at a decision. And my experience at the state, local, and federal level has been as more of a social worker or anthropologist in some ways than a lawyer, where in those roles in government you need to make some tough decisions and know you're not going to make everybody happy, but you need to do it after listening to everyone and meeting with everyone, and multiple trips up to consult with the tribes, in this case for the Klamath on a particular decision under the Clean Water Act that we had to make, which was challenging. But I think when you think about, for example, water rights law that we work at, there's something really important there that is a little less important in the Klamath, but is important in all kinds of other places in California, including the Bay Delta, which is my great, painful, heartbreaking, sometimes making progress over the past 3 decades in great agreements, and other times having it just fall apart, which is that in California water rights, which are the most disorganized and unquantified of any of the Western states, we use that principle of first in time, first in right, where they borrowed miners' rules. And the irony of it, the painful, tragic irony of it is we say that, but everybody knows the tribes were here first. And yet they are ignored if they're not certain federal tribes. Now, fortunately, on the Klamath and on the Trinity, you've got federally recognized tribes who actually are senior because they have what are known as winter's rights. And I won't go into a big legal thing, but their date of recognition goes back to when they had a tribal treaty. The part of the challenge is that there are all kinds of federally recognized tribes who had treaties signed in California in the 1800s. And then the governor of the state of California and a bunch of business people and electeds went to DC and prevented it, lobbied to prevent them being ratified. So you have a whole host of federally recognized tribes who do not have access to the water rights they should have, let alone the non-federally recognized tribes in California and Nevada that were effectively disenfranchised once silver and gold were found in California and Nevada. So there's an enormous tragedy there. Fortunately, on the Klamath, you've got tribes, particularly three, fortunately resource-rich tribes who've maintained their identity with a raft of leaders, some of whom you saw there, who came to Sacramento, who invited us up. I don't know how many state players they invited up over and over and over again, and fed salmon to, and talked late into the night over meals, talked about each other sometimes, not always agreeing with the other tribe, but who had come together with an amazing group of nonprofit activists, lawyers, philanthropists, you name it, some farmers and ranchers, some others, but who came together to figure out how to solve this problem, made possible, and in keeping with examples of the Elwha and the Snake, and hopefully Potter Valley, which is also in California, is the next dam we hope to deal with here, to find dams, not the one that's serving as water supply and flood control for lots of people, but the ones who have reached the end of their useful life, and in many cases are up for relicensing at FERC. And to relicense it, we have a provision in the Clean Water Act that allows you to put water quality conditions on that didn't exist 50 years ago, because 50 years ago we didn't have the same environmental sensibilities or laws. And so that process would have led to very expensive requirements for fish ladders and other things, let alone rehabilitation, which also allowed for an economic reason that people could argue with, and the fact that we didn't need that hydropower there anymore. So those are the first dams that ought to come down that are big, but there are a ton of small ones that also have barriers, but you need to find the right, you got to remove the barriers of liability, you've got to find incentives, and you've got to find the money to take them down. But one last thing, I know I've gone long, is that the key thing in this, to my mind, having been through a host of controversial multi-stakeholder engagements, was that the quality of heart and intellect that people brought to this work, compassion for the regulators too, as people, that doesn't always happen, I have to say, to try and get folks to want to be a part of this incredible endeavor, which is a redemptive effort of enormous proportions, not just with the earth and with the nature and the ecosystem, but with people, and people that this one's going to go down in the history books as one of the most important things that's ever happened.
Yeah. Yes, for sure. I think that using the Klamath as a model for future work is because every dam has its champion. There's maybe multiple champions. You could see that there was conflict here as well. And often it's like farmers versus fish, or tribes versus, regulators or corporations. And it's just, to make progress, you've got to get beyond those very simple ways of doing things. I want to turn to Romain Maendly, who is a supervising water resources engineer with the California Department of Resources, which Felicia was also part of back in the day. He brings a technical and policy perspective on how large-scale water systems are managed, restored, and planned for in a changing climate. Over the last 10 years at DWR, he has been involved in multiple climate and water management plans and studies. As you can also tell when he starts talking, Romain is from Switzerland, and he has a background in land surveying, environmental engineering with a specialization in water resources. So Romain, with your Swiss background, a country I've heard has more dams than any other country by size, and where dams have been essential infrastructure for centuries. So we're putting you on the spot here. I imagine you have some thoughts about their complex nature. Beyond the ideas about manifest destiny and control of nature, kind of explored in the film, we are not about to tear down every dam in California. We can't tear down every dam in California. So how do you talk about how to make priorities, how to make dams more environmental friendly, how to sort of prioritize? So putting your California policy hat on, what do you say about people who said tear down every dam?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me here. It's an honor as a Swiss citizen to be part of Swiss Next here. Back in 2004, I came here from Switzerland, and I was always looking at these events and be part of it, first of all. Second, you put me in a hot spot. I look at this banner when I came in, I was like, oh, I need to be prepared of it. No, it's a challenge, right? I think my head is a roller coaster around dams because I grew up. We were laughing about it just before the starting here. I grew up, climbing the mountains, building little dams in the rivers. I mean, that's how you grew up in Switzerland. And when you have all these rivers, I think there is almost no river who are natural in Switzerland. They are all channelized. You have a lot of 50% energy in Switzerland is developed through hydropower. That's a lot of reservoir. On top of that, I know there is new policies in Switzerland, to build more hydropower need. There is more energy need in Switzerland, so there is a perspective to build more dams on hydropower facilities. So I grew up in that space, came here in California, I saw the nature, the wilderness, very different than Switzerland in general. And so I did a study on life cycle assessment on reservoir, their impact on the environment. And so I truly believe that every reservoir has an impact on the environment. Many of them have a lot of benefits to provide to the population and so on. And so when I started to work with the Department of Water Resources, my first job was to evaluate the feasibility study of Sites Reservoir, which is right now being planned to be built. And so you can imagine in my head, coming from Switzerland, seeing the beauty of California, and then going back to build reservoirs. So I was like, oh my gosh, that's that's difficult. I think the biggest challenge ahead of us is really a relation to climate change. I agree there is many dams that may be able to be removed, but there is a societal need, and you can argue if that's sustainable or not, that required us to provide energy, water, flood risk protection throughout California. That's a need. I mean, the Department of Water Resources is providing water to 28 million people in Southern California. You may argue why people build there and we shouldn't provide them water, but ultimately they are here too. And so it's really finding the trade-off between the different water needs in general. In relation to climate change, I think my one positive side about reservoirs is that when we think about future extreme precipitation, in order 21%, 25% under 3 degrees Celsius warming for the atmospheric rivers who come from the Pacific coast along the Sierra Nevada, 25% of more intense precipitation, like water pressure, that will create massive flood risk in our communities. And the challenge is we are not nomad. We are static we have our house, we have our mortgage. And so it's going to be very hard to be able to like displace people first of all. And so the second solution is like really like maintaining some of the reservoirs will provide this flood risk protection in the long term. And so it's really, it's not an easy question, I will say. I truly believe that like some reservoirs should go because they have so much silt behind it. They don't even like carry their, they don't have the capacity, historical capacity. But there is many reservoirs who are still very valuable for our society and that we need to maintain. I will say that right now the best reservoir in my mind is our groundwater reservoir. I think that's really like the place that we should really invest in California, is to find ways to like bring these potential negative impact from climate change, capitalize flood flows, park it into the ground as a saving account, and flex our reservoir. And so these last 3 years or 4 years, I've been involved in the San Joaquin watershed studies, where we look at not only capitalize on flood flow to do groundwater recharge, but also how to reoperate reservoirs to create flood flows for the environment early in the spring run, right? Like fall run, which is important for the fish. This water is parked into the ground and can come back as natural flow to keep the river cool for the fish. Because again, with climate change, a lot of these rivers will not have the same temperature that we have right now. And going back to the point, like in Switzerland, just this year, we had to shut down a nuclear power plant because the river who was cooling the power plant was too warm. And so you can imagine that, yes, I would love to see less reservoirs. I think I love the environment. I work on river restoration, but at the same time, there is like major societal challenges that are ahead of us. And reservoirs are part of the solution. They shouldn't be discarded.
That's a really excellent perspective. I appreciate that. Our last panelist we've saw in the film is Annelia Norris, and also her beautiful artwork here. She's a member of the Yurok tribe from the lower Klamath River. She's a mother, an activist, and a natural leader in her community. Although her work has mostly played an important role as a visual voice for Klamath River justice campaigns and community wellness, her individual voice has been shared in collaborative shows such as this one. Annelia's work intertwines traditional techniques and motifs with contemporary materials to explore the intersections between past Indigenous experience and contemplations of future reality for generations to come. Her work mostly speaks to issues concerning identity, displacement, and the complexities of colonization. Annelia was a contributor to many exhibitions that advocated for and celebrates the Klamath Dam removals, including the exhibition here at SwissNex. Annelia, how did you first get involved in protesting the Klamath Dams, and how did you come to create the piece here, Rebel with a Cause? Rebel with a Cause, sorry.
Yes, Rebel. I want to start by talking about the piece. It's really like this physical representation of the emotional chaos that we felt throughout the dam removal campaign, and really where it came to rest when the dams came down, and it's this heap of a heart, I would say, that went into this campaign, that all of our people, the emotion and the heart and the time and effort that went into removing these dams, and it was a collaborative effort. You can see all of the different parts throughout the campaign represented there, and it wasn't just one aspect. It wasn't just policy change or laws. It wasn't just commercial fishermen. It was all these people coming together, all these different facets and strategies that we had to take to get to the point of dam removal. And so, yeah, the piece really represents that. And, this time I did create this new banner with a message saying, to take all of the dams down. And as unrealistic as it could be, I like to fantasize and imagine a world where all of our rivers are free and flowing in the natural state once again, because we have to remember the people who were first displaced by these types of systems that came to conquer the land and the people. And so, in our worldview, that is the way that we should be living. And when I talk about taking the dams down or being undammed, it's not just this act, but it's this philosophy of dismantling systems and dismantling colonial systems and dismantling the very things that keep us all harnessed, that have taken our humanness from us. The people, when you talk about restoring the land, you can't talk about restoring the land without also talking about supporting the people who are part of the land, because we believe that we are the land. And so when we talk about restoration and becoming well again and healing, and when we talk about the river healing, that includes our people and our cultures. And it means returning the people to the land back. And that means, that we are engaging once again with the land, and not just Indigenous people. Like we're all from the earth, right? Well, most of us are from the earth, and that's where we belong. And those are the relationships that we need to build again, that we've forgotten, because we're at this point of climate change where, we're realizing we don't have any control, right? The earth is going to do what it needs to do to recover. And that means flooding, that means oceans rising, that means fire, that means all of these natural disasters that will displace us. And that's inevitable. And that's something that we brought upon ourselves. And so it's so important when we talk about dismantling systems that it starts with us and our behaviors and how we live, and changing how we live, changing our dependencies. We are consumers, right? And so we are making choices to continue to destroy the earth through capitalism and through the systems that exist for the food system, for example. That's a low-hanging fruit, no pun intended, but we can change the way that we move our food around, especially here in California. We have to stop this industrial agriculture, and we can create small, micro-scale food systems that aren't going to destroy our entire water table, right? And that's something that we keep ignoring. Like, we're talking about, AI being this huge, this big threat to our water now, but we haven't addressed yet the industry and industrial agriculture and how much that has destroyed our water system. And we're talking, the cattle industry, cows, beef, meat, look at the fast food. Like, we all choose to engage in that. And so we can choose not to. And I think that's my message here with take all the dams down.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I wanted to ask you a little bit of a personal question. In sort of my reading about the movement to undam the Klamath, I heard that there was a new event that happened called the Salmon Run, where people did relay all the way the 400 plus miles of the Klamath River. What is it like for people who have lived on that river, seen it dammed for their entire life, to see the dams removed, and also parts of the river that hadn't seen water for 100 years see water? Can you talk a little bit about what that was like to have gone up the river when there was dams and now there's no dams?
Yeah, it's really incredible and inspiring. Yeah, that was the first time I had seen the movie clip, and it was so emotional, really. And that's really was the experience, watching this whole process happen and the removal of the dams. Yeah, for years, 20 years we've been doing the Salmon Run. It started just right on the Trinity with some students from the local high school in Hoopa. And, these girls wanted to bring attention to the fish kill that had happened. And so these students started this run. And then we've just brought this run, we've done this run every year for generations, and it's grown, to, we started doing it from the mouth up to, up to the dams. And then we decided to take it even further beyond the dams, because the idea was, first of all, bringing our communities together, and again, bringing this awareness, bringing this like collective energy or collective prayer, some people may call it, to see our river run free again, to help give those salmon that energy and reminder that we need them, bring the salmon home. And so this run has really, again, brought people together. And yeah, in the last couple of years during the dam removal process, it seemed like the dam removal wasn't going to happen, right? We had some moments that were like, oh man, we're defeated. Luckily, we didn't feel that. Like the things like the Salmon Run kept the heart going in this campaign, and that was like, I remember that year. It was really smoky. There was wildfires everywhere. The river was warm, and that year it was really difficult. And you can feel it running up the river. You could feel like how difficult it was to make that journey. But after the dams came out, we did continue the run, and it was incredible. It was incredible to see the difference in the upper basin, in the footprint of the reservoirs. Like that first year, it was just full of wildflowers. It was just like a sea of wildflowers, and it was just so beautiful, and that really resonated in all of our hearts. Like this is a beautiful thing, and this is our river coming back alive. And we talk about how the health of the people are related to the health of the river, and you can see that in our communities. Like the communities are feeling revived. We are beginning to thrive and do better, and bring back our cultural practices, the cultural burning. We're planting the plants that need to thrive there again. And so, yeah, it's just a beautiful thing that we've experienced.
Thank you. I'm going to talk with the panelists for a little bit more, and then we're going to open up for all of your burning questions. But I actually wanted to ask both Kara and Annelia to talk about the role of artists, especially Indigenous people, in helping the public grapple with and care about complex issues like dams, fish, and sovereign rights? How do you use your art to reach people, not just to express yourself, but actually to move them? What is the role of artists in that?
Artists can touch people's hearts, and when I wrote Rivers in My Veins, I had a choice. I made a choice because I come from journalism. I could easily have written a history book. I could have written a series of columns. I could have done political advocacy. I could have done all these things. But for my time and my art, what I decided I could do is write a poem about the lands and waters, because I do think we talk about land back, but it's also water back. So water in many cases is possibly more important to tribes than the land. And that was, my aim of that was to touch people's hearts. And because we have all this intellectual capacity, we have all this intellectual information coming at us all the time, and how much of that actually can break through to being meaningful to us. Art is a direct way to create meaning for the viewers or the readers to create their own meaning.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like it touches this different intellect in everybody's minds, but it's also important in getting a message across, and helping people to feel part of a movement. Every revolution, like the art is a centerpiece to it, and that's what inspires people. That's what moves people, like we're saying, on this different level. And that was one of the successful parts of this campaign, was the art moved the message. And we put art, and it wasn't just art hanging on a wall in a gallery for a few people to see. Like, this is an opportunity for everybody to be able to experience it. And the designs on the t-shirts, like, they're seen around the world, like our t-shirts around the world. And that's how far art can take a message, especially in the age of AI. But especially with the technology and the social medias, we're able to really, we can connect on this different level through art.
Felicia, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the art of collaboration and how you approach very, very difficult and contentious issues as a policymaker, but also in all of your role, to be able to come to some sort of agreement. Not consensus, right? It's not consensus, but it's progress forward. How do you do that? Because I think, as we've heard, there were times when it looked like Klamath dam removals were not going to happen.
Yeah, there were more ups and downs than that than at Magic Mountain or Six Flags from time to time. I think, and I was thinking about the earlier answer, the universal, I've said this many times, the universal answer is it depends when it has to do with water, because you have to look at the circumstances of a situation. I've done it both as a community organizer and as a decision maker. I've kind of gone back and forth, but there are certain commonalities. You made a very good point. It's not about making everybody happy, but it's about respecting all the varied interests that people have and trying to see if you can see a path where you can not split the baby, but where you can find a path of integrity through it. Which means, it's similar to good organizing, and this was a place of extraordinary, deft organizing, which is you've got to be willing to do the tough thing and make people unhappy to get attention, right? Or to do the right thing. Kind of depends on the circumstance. Like, you've got to go to Scotland and go to that meeting. You've got to embarrass Warren Buffett to get the attention, to have the conversation. but then have the empathy to realize that there are going to be consequences to things. And in almost, although taking the dams out was the objective, there are myriad agreements and things that go around it where the tribes were also very empathetic to the impact of this on other people. And you couldn't make everyone happy, like the people who had a view on a lake. Hopefully they'll see that the view of a river running through a meadow with wildflowers is also beautiful. With time, people are always afraid, so you have to be empathetic on that. But you have to use multiple tools, right? And as a decision maker, there are a couple things. Again, you've got to be willing to have everybody mad at you at some point. And you have to decide what you think the right path is. And it's not that easy to get to sometimes. I always call this the Panetta rule. Because Leon Panetta, who was in Congress, who was the president's chief of staff, he headed the Defense Department. He's like an incredible, respected person now at Cal State Monterey. And he said that he would, when he had to make a hard decision, now Obama asked him how he made hard decisions when they were trying to decide whether to go after Osama bin Laden. And he said, you have all these people coming at you, but ultimately in your heart of hearts, you had been a congressman, you have to think of what would a regular person, a regular good-hearted person, want me to do if they knew what I know. And that's how you make the decision. You don't make it by deciding who wins and loses after their 3 minutes at the podium. And it's very hard to do and very few people do. But if you have that as the guiding light and you're willing to be the tough guy, if that's part of your role, like for us, this 401 Clean Water Act, we were the one everyone were scared of and could use to say when they do this, you're ultimately going to have to take those dams out. But we kept putting it in abeyance because they were doing such a good job, and that's a whole nother story. But this to me is the most important thing I've seen everywhere, whether it's working on sewage or air or whatever. You can't just do it based on the people that come to you. You can't just do it based on what people say at a podium. You have to have empathy for people's fears and what they fear losing. And sometimes you have to do that one-on-one. I mean, when Governor Brown interviewed me for my job, I told him I had drunk more alcohol, and no disrespect to people who don't drink, but I had drunk more alcohol on behalf of the environment than anybody knew. Because I had to constantly, during the Bay Delta Accord years, go out over and over again for a glass of wine with certain of my friends in the environmental community, and Brian probably knows who I'm talking about, to say, you guys have won the war, you got to give up on a few things. So you've got, what is the answer here that doesn't make it, permanent war? And we did the same thing when we did the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, where I knew that farmers knew we had to do something, but politically they couldn't say so out loud. So I was in coffee shops and bars where people would go, you have to make us do this, but don't say I told you so. So you kind of have to understand that dynamic, and you also have to, and I'll stop, you have to have empathy, particular in this case, for the fact that your view of something frequently depends on when you think history begins. Which is one of what my colleagues at EPA used to say about Bay Delta, which is, to me, it's clear that the tribes have a longer history and that they have knowledge and experience and equity in recovering some things. And this may be my bias, that, they haven't forgotten the things that we've forgotten for 100 and something years in Western society, as if we invented the world, which we didn't. And this era is about reconnecting with those truths that some people have known since time immemorial about how nature works and how we're connected to it and how important it is to us. But you can't just say that at someone who's afraid. So you have to find ways to have multiple conversations to break down those walls. But sometimes you just have to make a call on what you think the right answer is. And the dams coming down is one that it's clearly the right answer in this case. And the tribes did an extraordinary job with their allies in putting every brick in that wall you needed, from understanding the economics to understanding the FERC rules to understanding all those different things, to bringing art and humanity into the conversation versus just handing it to lawyers. And they also had extraordinary lawyers, like Amy Cordalis and other people who understood how to develop a holistic strategy to gain hearts and minds, both in the community, in government entities, and in the media. I mean, it's just the holistic strategy and the family of people that came together in this endeavor starts with the tribes, but is an incredible accomplishment, which makes the job of a decision maker a lot easier if you can be a little part of it.
I think one more question from the panel, and then we'll open it up. Romain, you mentioned watersheds, and I know the Klamath River is a pretty unique river. It runs through 2 states, Oregon and California, and its headwaters are really like a marsh, like a wetlands, and then the mouth flows into the river. So when we think about systems, we think about the Klamath River, but it's really much more than that. It's a watershed. Can you just give us just a very quick overview about how you actually integrate that into thinking about dams and water and reservoirs and equity and all the kinds of things as a policymaker you have to consider?
Yeah, so, as an engineer, water resources engineer, you always think about watershed as a unit, right? And it's really going from the headwater to the groundwater, and really thinking about the step process of a drop of water coming from the top to the downstream. 5 years ago, 2018, I came with a small proposal to my deputy director about the theme of watershed. I think we had many programs in the department was working great. Example, the integrated watershed management program or integrated water management programs who have been in place for 20 years. But some of the challenge with this program was that, first of all, the equity piece was just a check in the box. In my perspective, I think some local integrated watershed management plan were doing a pretty good job, but many of them forget about scrutinize the whole population or bringing the population around the table. The second thing was they really broke down the upper watershed to the downstream watershed, and so there is little conversation between the reservoir operators to the farmers or the ecological entities downstream. And on top of that, they were only looking at flood or water supply or ecosystem, not really integrating the multi-sector aspect. And so if you look into the California Oil Plan 2023, that was one big theme. The 3 themes were climate change, watershed, and equity. And through this plan, we propose an evolution to our IRWM programs. We really wanted to push local entities to think about the one watershed perspective, try to encourage them to do a climate change vulnerability with all the entities in the watershed and develop an adaptation plan. One of the biggest challenges was to bring the tribal knowledge into the perspective and really reaching out to these tribal communities to develop this plan. A lot of entities were we never talk to them. We don't know how to reach out to them. And so that's really putting them in an uncomfortable space. And I think you really need to get into this uncomfortable space in order to advance and be proactive. The other thing I will say about watershed is that right now, many of our backbone infrastructure are aging. They will cost many billions of dollars in investments for the state of California. The best chance of resilience is at the watershed scale. Are we able to meet our mean by being sustainable at the watershed? And hopefully over time we can pivot from a more localized water management structure rather than relying on major infrastructures. Obviously these major infrastructures still have a purpose. We're still investing in them, but they're very costly. And so it's balancing local needs versus state needs.
Mm-hmm. Great. I think we're ready to open up.
Yes, please.
Yes.
Whoever has a question, please let me know, and the mic will be yours. Yes. Greg, artist of our show and the moderator of our AI Water panel.
Thank you so much for an amazing panel. It was really great to listen to you all. And recently, the UAE exited OPEC, and the UAE minister said, the reason why we exit is because the world needs more oil. The world needs more energy. And I think there's a little bit of a lag between what we're talking about here and the additional problems that are being created every day. And so how could we reduce that lag between the solutions we know of, traditional solutions of paying attention, and and the problems that we're facing that seem to be actually not decreasing, but increasing?
Well, that's a very simple question you've posed here. I mean, you're talking about global issues, but are there examples from what we've done on a local level? Obviously, the Klamath was a globally reached program, but are there ways that we can use this to advance bigger goals for energy, water, climate change?
Of course there is. I mean, like, there is a solution about, just educating people, number one. I think we, like through John Andrew, who is here in the room, we have a climate change program in the department where has been educated, like, I think 1,000 teachers. And this teacher educates climate change and water management to millions of kids in California. And so that's the first step, education and making sure that, we're sharing experience, more broadly. That's number one. I think also California, because we have a platform to really show what is the progress compared to the world. I mean, my climate change analysis is informing UNESCO and throughout the world. And so there is a great opportunity, like the Klamath River, to showcase what can be done. I think it's really like be able to elevate these talking points, make them relevant for like everybody on a day-to-day basis. Because somebody who has a hard time to pay the bill at the end of the day, they will not care. They will care about like what is the price of my gasoline I'm going to put in my car. And so what make them resonate? Why should they change the behavior for a better outcome? I think that's really the key.
Thank you. I would just say about energy. Many of the dams that we're talking about, the 50 to 100-year-old dams like those on the Klamath, like those on the Columbia River, are not producing energy in the way maybe they were historically, or in a way compared to modern forms of energy production, such as windmills. And so the dams, the existing dams as they exist are not the answer in the long term. And we don't know this size of dam in the history. I'm sorry, I'm getting into your area. In the history of the world, how long do these dams last? How long do they function? These may be getting to the end of their lives in many cases. Two, across the West, we have both American and European energy companies have targeted tribal lands, tribal areas in proximity to reservations, first food gathering areas for energy development. That is the story across the West. The nuclear waste, that's, people who talk about nuclear power being great, they rarely talk about the waste. The waste is primarily dumped in proximity to tribes. And so any energy future in the West has to change that. We have to, through consultation, through planning processes, determine an equitable way to place our future energy developments that don't disproportionately affect Black and brown people. And that has to be part of our future. I don't know how to get that out of a conversation in the Western United States. I know the Intertribal Timber Council has been meeting with the European Union because some of the tribes have grown their businesses to a point that they are trading on a global scale. But new rules about reporting on data about where timber is sourced are causing concern to the tribes that are concerned about their data sovereignty, their privacy, about where their lands are, even while those tribes exceed the ecological standards of everyone. And what the tribes, what the Intertribal Timber Council has said is we need a form of consultation in Europe, the tribes in the US, which are governments, governments that are under the federal government, the tribes, then the states. And we have new ways. We know that there are new ways, as you've said, of doing these things. We need to explore how do we activate these worldwide. In our region, in the Yakama Nations region, the Rockport area, there are European energy companies that are installing these massive windmill sources, like green. It's sort of green energy. We call it green energy, but is it green when it disproportionately affects one community? And in doing that, they're fencing off the areas where the windmills are placed, blocking off hundreds of acres of first food gathering sites for the tribes. Does it have to be that way, or through consultation, could we find a different way to fence those windmills that allowed tribal access? And I'm not really tying back to OPEC, but we've got enough kind of crisis level things in our region that I want to highlight.
And I'd like to just say, I feel like you're asking the question, how do we keep living this way? You know, and that's the bottom line. We as humans, it's time for us to make sacrifices. It's time for us to reduce and stop living this way. It's time for us to stop consuming. You know, what is the point of Las Vegas? Like, you know how much energy that place takes? It's killing the Colorado River. It's literally killing the river. That river is dying. So what are we, like, we need to just, you know, you can't just say we need to just stop. Like, we all individually need to actively make changes in our own lives and how we live and what we are consuming and our ideals of what need is and what want is. Like, we can't keep living like this.
This is going to sound mundane now. I do think telling the stories of progress in a very human way has real power. And in almost, this is my experience from the nonprofit world, is you can get funding to do a project, but you should have 4 times as much funding to tell the story afterward of the stories that need to be told of human accomplishing and redemption and all of that. And so it's hard to get those stories out, particularly in the media. I would say from the energy side, though, it part of what's heartbreaking there is, like, we were winning. I mean, it's like a 30-year, I was at NRDC for a while. It's like a 30-year seeing how you end up winning through making it economically viable. And now China and every place, there are all these places where clean energy was going to be winning. It's sort of one of the key things. And you had fossil fuels on their last gasp, and then for whatever reason, we end up electing, and there are reasons, whatever, I don't want to be political about it, somebody who wants to set back the clock on everything. Like, you could say it's the last gasp of a paradigm shift, where it's always like, just ask Galileo and Copernicus. I mean, sort of the last gasp of a paradigm shift is where the resistance can be the highest, but right now it feels like the world is going to be over. So it's a combination, I think, of politics and unfortunate choices and the power of certain rules, but there's also the need to create a different narrative of the way the world can be and have it carry on. Because I found when you deal with regular people, which is coming out of local government and organized where I am, I mean, and maybe people just, most people's hearts are good and they want to be part of a community, and you can help make those changes be exciting. When I was in LA and we were rolling out Public Works, we were rolling out, the biggest recycling program in the country, and this is in the late 80s, early 90s. People made fun of my little yellow bins. And I said, you may make fun of my little yellow bins, but they're the only thing that ties LA together. And people want to be a contributor to their community. And they're now giant blue bins and green bins and I was right. But it was like, if you can give people a vehicle to do the right thing in their own life, whether it was conservation, where we kicked ass and got 24% conservation in very little time during the drought in the teens, when we kind of went around the water agencies who didn't want to do it. And they're not bad. I'm empathetic to how disruptive it was. But when you gave the public the information about what they could do to be helpful, they said they would do it to save a fish, they would do it to save a farm. So I think the problem is in some ways part of inspiration and communication, and our current political system rewards the forces of distraction and disruption and argument in a way that poisons the ability to just do what people really would like us all to do.
But I also, can I just say, I also think that the environmental movement and, progress and energy efficiency are like the salmon. They were kind of written off, but they're still here. They're still fighting. And I feel like we cannot let those people determine what we do and what we want to do to, solve our problems and not keep doing, as you said, the same things over and over that are destroying.
Yeah, and I just want to add, people, we have power. We do have power. I mean, look what we did with the dam removal. And if we want to think beyond capitalism and what comes next, what could be different, it's us setting that example and doing those things, changing our food systems, changing how we educate our kids, we have to make those changes for them to come. We have to start actively doing it different. So.
And we can't give up.
Right. No, you cannot give up. Never give up.
So, thank you so much. Greg, your question was just too good, and we covered 20 minutes of question time. But our panelists and moderator are here with us for some appetizers and wine, so you are welcome to approach them and ask your questions. Let's give them a warm applause. Thank you so much for this wonderful conversation.